What's up, guys? My name is Dionysius Zervos, Dion Zervos, whatever you want to call me. I am the host of the Z Report, and today we have the National League prediction and preview, followed by that American League episode that I put out yesterday. All three divisions are out now on YouTube if you guys want to go check them out. They're on Spotify as well. A bunch of really good U Stadium content coming your way for all of baseball season, so stay tuned, subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. But let's hop into the National League East, and then we'll follow every single division from there. But we will be doing over-unders for every single team in the NL. Let's kick it off with the East and the Atlanta Braves. So first, let's run through the additions. Let's run through the subtractions. Notable acquisition, Robert Suarez from the Padres, really good reliever. Ha-Seong Kim, Mike Yastrzemski, Raisel Iglesias re-signed Mauricio Dubon with that trade from the Astros. Martin Perez, Jorge Mateo, Jonah Heim, Tyler Kinley, Joel Payamps, Danny Young, Ian Hamilton, Kyle Farmer, and Rowdy Tellez. They lost Marcelo Zuna. They lost Alek Manoah. They've lost Nick Allen and Pierce Johnson. So one of the bigger stories going into the year for the Braves is obviously losing out to, well, not losing out to anyone, but losing Jurickson Profar due to a PED suspension. That was a really big issue for the Braves going into the season as they plan to have him in the lineup. And, they may be bailed out, not have to pay a lot of the contract. The problem is when you plan to have a guy like that on your lineup, someone that actually performed really, really well for the Padres a couple years ago, while he probably was cheating, that kind of threw a wrench in their plans. It was a little too late to make any bounce back moves after Profar kind of screwed up. So let's run through the projected lineup and the projected rotation, and I'll give you guys my thoughts on this over-under. So Ronald Acuna Jr. leading off, followed by Drake Baldwin, the National League Rookie of the Year, Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Mike Yastrzemski, who has been honestly one of the more underrated players in baseball with the San Francisco Giants. Ozzie Albies, a great switch hitting option in the middle of that lineup. Dom Smith, Mets legend. How crazy is that? Followed by Michael Harris and Mauricio Dubon. It's a solid little lineup. I got to give it to them. You have a couple guys over here that could potentially surpass a 4 WAR. Acuna is definitely going to be there. I think Drake Baldwin definitely takes a step forward as well. They struggled a lot last year. The Braves won 76 games. Zips has them at 86 this year. But before I give you guys the prediction, let's run through the rotation as well. It is Chris Sale, the National League Cy Young from a couple years ago, Ronaldo Lopez, Grant Holmes, Bryce Elder, and Jose Suarez. A decent little rotation. Obviously, Chris Sale at this point is 37 years old. How much are you able to get out of him? Reynaldo Lopez had a couple great moments for the Braves last year. Grant Holmes, Bryce Elder. I mean, it's not looking that great at the back end of the bullpen, but Holmes did have a solid year. He has some great 2026 projections as well. I mean, they have him down here for at least 1.5 WAR, at least a 4 ERA according to Fangraphs. And I would assume it's probably going to be better just because the Braves are great at getting the most out of these pitchers that you've never even heard of. So the line is set at 86.5 wins. And honestly, guys, did they get 10 wins better? Did they do enough this offseason to get 10 wins better? That's the question. It's actually not 10 wins better. It's 11 wins better because they won 76 last year. Zips has them at exactly 86. And I think that's where I'm at as well. I'm going under. I just, at the end of the day, this kind of seems reminiscent to the Braves teams of the past. And I'm not sure if any of these guys are really going to bounce back or even take it to the next level. I think having Acuna healthy is the key to this all. If you could get a full 162 out of Ronald Acuna Jr. and Matt Olson returns to form, if Austin Riley returns to form, it's a lot of questions in the lineup. Obviously, I like the addition of Yastrzemski. I already said that. Dom Smith at the bottom of the lineup. There's question marks. There's definitely question marks, and I think the rotation is an even bigger question mark. So I lean under here. I'm got to go somewhere around the 82 to 84 range for the over-under, so I'm on the under. And that brings us to the Miami Marlins, the dreaded Miami Marlins, who won 79 games last year. Let me pull you guys up their projected lineup and their offseason moves. So the Marlins did not make any acquisitions in free agency whatsoever. I don't blame them either. This is clearly like a tryout year. You got to give these guys a chance eventually, especially these younger players. And that's exactly what the Marlins are going to do. Acquisitions here: Owen Casey, Pete Fairbanks, Chris Morel, Asteria Ruiz, Chris Paddock, John King. Paddock has been bouncing around a lot of teams, I feel like, as of late. They have lost Edward Cabrera in a trade with the Cubs. I think he's going to have a really good year. They've also lost Ryan Weathers in a trade with the Yankees. They've lost Joey Weimer, Dane Myers, and Eric Wagaman, who's quite a decent first baseman for the Marlins last year. And the Zips have them at around 76 wins. The line is 72.5. But before we make a judgment on that, let's read you guys the projected lineup, the projected rotation. Jacob Marcy, who I think is a really underrated player for fantasy this year. I think he's going to play all 162 of these games for the Miami Marlins because they don't really have a lot of other options. Xavier Edwards, another guy, switch hitting bat that I think has potential to be a top second baseman in the game. Maybe a bold prediction. I don't think so. He has a lot of potential. They traded for him from the Rays in November of 22, and I think that he will take a big leap this year just because of the amount of opportunity he's getting. Augustine Ramirez, Liam Hicks, Otto Lopez, Griffin Conine, Chris Morel, Owen Casey, Connor Norby. Guys, I'm not going to try and convince you that this is a good lineup by any stretch of the imagination. I don't see a singular guy that could even potentially bust out a above 100 WRC plus, maybe Marcy, maybe Edwards, maybe Ramirez. I mean, who was a solid catching option for them last year, but nothing great in this lineup per se. I think it'll probably perform a little bit better than the projections say, just because the Marlins are always one of these weird, pesky teams that always somehow manage to beat up on the Braves, the Phillies, the Mets. It happens every single year. They are horrible against everyone else, but they perform well in the NL East. It's a really strange phenomenon. But going on to this rotation, which is really the shining light for the Miami Marlins. I mean, if the Marlins want to win more than 72.5 games this year, it starts with this rotation. It starts with the stopper, Sandy Alcantara, who had a pretty rough season last year. He hasn't been the ace that he normally has been. Fangraphs is projecting him for a 4 ERA, so they don't really think he's going to have much of a big jump this year. Yuri Perez is the one that I think has all the potential in the world. 23-year-old stud, right-handed arm that throws absolute gas. I really, really think Yuri Perez, if he could break that 160 to 170 innings pitched limit, he could be a stud for the Miami Marlins. I think Max Meyer also has a ton of potential. So there's a couple guys here in the rotation that I think are okay. I think once after you look at Meyer, it's Paddock and Jansen Junk. The jokes literally write themselves. This guy's name is Junk, and he throws junk. Unfortunately for him, bit ironic. But nothing special at the bottom half of the rotation. You know, and if the Marlins are playing at least somewhat decent, or let me correct that, if Sandy and Yuri are pitching somewhat decent, it would not surprise me in the slightest if they go and ship either one of these guys out at the deadline to bring in some future prospects or just see what type of haul you could get, because I think a lot of competing teams in the National League and the American League are going to be dying for arms. We know that the Marlins, the Athletics, the Rockies, these teams kind of just act like feeder organizations for the playoff teams. So I don't expect much different here. Miami Marlins line is set at 72.5, and they will win less than that. They are horrible. Zips has them at 76. I don't see anything going in this lineup whatsoever outside of the two pitchers at the front of the rotation. Not much going on there. The bullpen, couple decent names. I like Pete Fairbanks. Outside of that, nothing really. Calvin Fusher, mid. Not really moved by it whatsoever. Like I said, Zips has them at 76. Their line is at 72.5. I have to go under here. I think they probably ship out all these guys at the deadline, and they will be a shell of themselves in the second half of the season. So that will bring us to the New York Mets, my New York Mets. And we have a bunch to talk about when it comes to the New York Mets, who won 83 game 80, cannot speak, second day in a row, stutter. I don't know why, boys. I don't know why. But 83 games they won last year, a very disappointing end to the season where they had their playoff spot essentially ripped away from them by the low-life Cincinnati Reds. They couldn't do enough to win the last game of the season against the Miami Marlins and make the playoffs. We all saw it coming. It was a disaster ever since Kodai Senga went down with that injury on that horrible throw from Pete Alonso, who isn't here anymore. So let's run through who they added, who they lost, because it's a lot, and it's a lot of notable names that everyone knows. So, of course, some notable acquisitions for the New York Mets. Bo Bichette, the biggest one of them all, 3-year deal with an opt-out after year one. The gem of the rotation, Freddie Peralta, David Stearns being able to work some magic with his former organization, the Milwaukee Brewers, to bring New York an ace that they've been yearning for. Of course, in the outfield and center field, Luis Robert Jr., who automatically is going to be an upgrade over the combination of Jeff McNeil, Tyrone Taylor, Cedric Mullins. The outfield, or specifically the center field spot for the Mets, was in volatility all of last year. Third base was another spot that was in volatility all of last year, not knowing if they should start Vientos there. Should they play Mauricio? They've had a bunch of different question marks at those two specific positions. By bringing in Bo Bichette and Luis Robert Jr., you are answering those immediately. And then, of course, the addition of Marcus Semien up the middle, former Blue Jays teammate with Bo Bichette. I think defensively, that is as good as it gets up the middle, guys. Marcus Semien at second, Francisco Lindor at short, Luis Robert Jr. in center field, and of course, Francisco Alvarez behind the dish, who I expect to have a bounce back year as well. He's been hitting really, really well in spring training, and he had all the hype in the world, so I totally expect him to step it up this year. He was a top prospect for us for a reason. I think he's going to show it in the year 2026. Adding Devin Williams, adding Jorge Polanco, the clutch machine from the Mariners, Tobias Myers, MJ Melendez, Luis Garcia, Craig Kimbrell, and Mike Talkman, who unfortunately just went down with a really, really horrible injury. And let's look at the subtractions. Of course, Pete Alonso, who, like I said in the American League episode yesterday, Mets fans will miss him. Do I need to see every single one of his highlights? No, I don't, nor do I care to see them being played. Same thing goes for Edwin Diaz. Same thing goes for Brandon Nimmo. Edwin Diaz, you're playing the trumpets in Los Angeles as your closer song still. Kind of corny. Kind of corny. Like, I think that's a Mets thing specifically. You could hate on me all you want, but the trumpets are a Mets thing. We made you, Edwin. We saved you from the depths of the Seattle Mariners all those years ago. We traded Jared Kelenic for you. Everyone bashed us for it, and you turned into one of the best closers in baseball with that walkout song, and now you're taking it to LA? Yeah, I don't know, buddy. It's going to lose its luster, in my opinion. But continuing on, obviously losing Brandon Nimmo in the trade with the Rangers that brought over Marcus Semien, losing Jeff McNeil in the trade that sent him over to the Athletics. The Mets are paying a majority of that contract. That's how bad they wanted Jeff McNeil out of the locker room. They've lost Tyler Rogers, who I thought was a decent arm in the bullpen last year. Probably could have kept him. Sproat, Williams, Acuna, of course, all traded away. Mullins is gone. Starling Marte is gone. And the bullpen has a lot of guys that are just out of here that had horrible 2025s. Probably the reason that we lost a lot more games than we should have, specifically Ryan Helsley, specifically Gregory Soto, specifically Ryan Stanek. All three of those guys throw gas. They don't know, or let me reiterate myself, they don't have the shape or the ride on their fastballs to be able to deliver in big moments. I think David Stern saw that, and he sent these guys packing. I don't blame him whatsoever. So we will head into the depth chart for the New York Mets real quick, give you guys their projected lineup, projected rotation. It's a lot of goodies. I'm a big fan of what the Mets have done this offseason. I'm a believer in David Stearns. You could hate on me all you want, but they won 83 games last year and clearly needed a change. 14th in batting average last year, 18th in starter ERA, 15th in relief pitcher ERA. And this is what the lineup is shaping out to be. Batting leadoff, Francisco Lindor, beautiful switch hitting option at the top of the lineup. I think we're done with slow-ass Brandon Nimmo over there, which is phenomenal, not having to depend on Brandon Nimmo in the lineup batting leadoff every single day and him claiming that he's the captain, yada, yada, yada. Who the hell knows what was going on in that locker room last year? Of course, the machine, Juan Soto, followed by Bo Bichette, Jorge Polanco, Luis Robert Jr., who I really have high expectations for this season, Brett Baty, Marcus Semien, and my favorite of the entire bunch, Carson Bench. Thank you, David Stearns, for listening and answering our prayers. The Mets needed a legitimate right field option. I think that having Soto there last year was a bit of a mistake because of the dimensions of right field in City Field, replacing him with a young, athletic, really good outfielder like Carson Bench, a guy that can just do everything well, is a plus in my opinion. And giving him the shot straight out of spring training because of how well he's been performing down there was much, much, much deserved. I expect a lot out of Carson Bench this year. I know that we don't want to throw high expectations on rookies. We feel like that could potentially ruin them down the line, that they're not living up to what they should be doing, yada, yada, yada. I don't think so. I don't think that's the case with this kid whatsoever. He's a ball player. You watch him play and he just looks the part. Sometimes you could see it, man. You really can. You just watch a guy play and you know automatically they're going to be an animal. That's the same feeling I get for McGonigal of the Tigers. That's the same feeling I get for Connor Griffin of the Pirates, two of the best prospects in the game. I just think that Carson Bench is a hell of a ball player. 21th overall in the ranked in 2026. I mean, he was second overall in prospect rankings for the Mets. He is one of our top guys, and they're going to be banking on him to play a solid right field for us, of course, followed by Francisco Alvarez, who we talked about before. Let's hop into the rotation, which is really where we're cooking with gas here. Of course, the great trade for Fedde Peralta. The Mets needed an ace. The main reason they lost a ton last year was because these starting pitchers weren't able to get out of the fourth, fifth inning. We were overworking our bullpen. Not a singular guy was able to dominate on a night in, night out. The Mets needed a stopper to get rid of all these losing streaks. When you lose 4 or 5 in a row, you need that ace, top of the rotation alpha to just stop the bleeding. And that's exactly what the Mets have added with Fedde Peralta. They have, well, not they, Fangraphs has him over here projected for a 2.6 WAR, 3.83 ERA. I think those are Looney Tunes numbers. I think he's going to severely outperform that. I think he's going to be a low 3 ERA guy, ton of strikeouts, really high K per nine, and will be one of the best pitchers in baseball, in my opinion. Followed by David Peterson, who's like the underrated, unsung hero of this Mets rotation for the past couple of years. We've seen Peterson develop into a really solid pitcher. He was great for us in 2024. I expect to see more out of him this year. Nolan McLean. You could say what you want about his performances in the WBC. The stuff is filthy. It is some of the best off-speed pitches you will ever watch in baseball. He is just a beautiful, beautiful watch. If I wasn't a Mets fan, I would still be watching all of Nolan McLean's starts because he is one of those guys that doesn't depend on velocity to blow you away. He's going to beat you with his craftiness, and I appreciate that type of pitcher much more than the guy that's going out there and pumping 101 every single time, and it will eventually blow his arm out. I expect Nolan McLean to have a very long and very successful career. Clay Holmes was, dare I say, the most consistent starter for the Mets last year, a guy who wasn't even a starter 2 years ago, that the Mets converted from a relief pitcher who was struggling onto the Yankees to a legitimate right-handed arm in the rotation. Having him fourth is awesome, and I think he's going to do great things for the Mets this year. I expect him to take another big step as a starting pitcher, followed by Kodai Senga, who really just needs that fifth, sixth day of rest to get things going. The stuff is there as well. We saw his numbers before the injuries. I think it was something insane, like a 1.8 or even below ERA in the 15 starts that he had before he got hurt on that horrible throw by Pete Alonso. I expect Kodai Senga to really bounce back this year. The main concern for me is obviously Sean Manaea. I'm not sure what we're doing with him. Is he going to be in the bullpen? Is he going to be used in a piggyback role? That's what it seems like, at least from what Carlos Mendoza has been saying. So there's a lot to like. In the bullpen as well. Of course, losing Edwin Diaz is a huge deal. I think probably a bigger deal than most people will make out, but replacing him with Devin Williams, who struggled last year and has the potential, that airbender, nasty type pitch that is known to blow hitters away. It's just really funny that if you told me at the end of the 2024 season when the Mets and Pete Alonso hit that hit that homer off of Devin Williams to take the lead in Milwaukee, that only a couple years later the roles would be reversed, that Pete Alonso wouldn't be on the Mets and Devin Williams would be, I would never believe you. After that, I honestly kind of have grown to not be a huge fan of Devin Williams. What he did last year with the Yankees scares me. I'm not sure if the guy is able to pitch in New York. I don't think he would have taken a contract again for the Mets or in New York if he truly was scared. So I'm not sure what to think with him. Luke Weaver, another guy in the Yankees that was, he's had his moments. He's been solid. Brooks Raley, another guy. So there's a couple dudes in this bullpen, but I don't know if it's going to be dominant or one of the top um, bullpens in the league. I'm not sure if I see that for the Mets. What I do think will happen with the Mets though is this lineup will score runs. That's the bottom line. They will score runs. That's it. That's a big part of why the Mets were not able to succeed. The lack of offensive firepower at the end of the season really cost them, really bit them in the ass. Getting rid of Alonso, getting rid of Nimmo, I was ready for a change as a Mets fan, and I think adding Bichette, Polanco, Semien, those are three proven playoff hitters that know how to show up in the biggest of moments, that have fantastic numbers with runners in scoring position. I think the Mets and David Stearns, like I said, I keep saying like I said, I got to stop that. But he has done more than enough to put the Mets into a good situation here. They won 83 last year. Zips has them at 89 this year. The over-under is 90.5. I think the Mets are the class of the NL East this year. I think they could figure out that bullpen on the fly. If they need to trade for someone at the deadline, they can. Give me the over on the New York Mets. I have them somewhere at around 92, 93, and winning the NL East with ease. So with that, let's hop on over to the Philadelphia Phillies. Of course, the Mets' biggest rival, the reigning National League East champs, who have done nothing. Going to be honest, guys, they really have not done a ton. We could run through all their additions and subtractions right now. We will start with Kyle Schwarber, who they re-signed on that massive 5-year deal, running it back, basically bringing back JT Realmuto, running it back, basically. Brad Keller, Adolis Garcia, who was horrible for the Rangers last year. I don't expect much out of him, and the fact they even have him in this projected lineup is pretty scary. Jonathan Bolin, Kyle Backus, Zach Pop, Dylan Moore, and they have lost Ranger Suarez, who was a large part of their rotation last year. So is Christopher Sanchez going to take a big enough jump where losing Ranger Suarez doesn't matter? I don't think so. You're also losing Harrison Bader, who was a solid force in center field for them. Nick Castellanos is gone. Everything that happened in Miami last year, I think he ruffled the wrong feathers in that Philadelphia Phillies locker room. They got rid of him. Matt Strahm, he's on the Royals. He was solid for the Phillies in 2024 and was a big reason why they even made it down the stretch of the season with as good a bullpen they did. Obviously folded against the Mets in the NLDS, but he's still a solid arm that I think they will miss. Jordan Romano, who has been horrible for the past 3-4 years now. It doesn't matter what team, Blue Jays, Phillies, and now the Angels, he will be horrible no matter what. David Robertson, who may be like 45, not even joking, and Walker Buehler, who is signed with the Padres. I thought that was someone they could have potentially turned around, but it doesn't really look like it. So let's run through the projected lineup real quick. It is leadoff, Trey Turner, batting second, Kyle Schwarber, third, Harper, Bohm, Stott, Garcia, Marsh, Realmuto, Crawford. More or less the same lineup that we saw last year, the team that won 96 games. Zips has them projected in 91. Let's look at the rotation. Christopher Sanchez, Aaron Nola, Jesus Luzardo, Taijuan Walker, and Andrew Painter. And this is where I have the problem, because the bullpen is lights out. Joan Duran, Jose Alvarado, Brad Keller, Tanner Banks, all four of those guys are really, really good relief farms that they could probably bank on for a large part of the season. We're obviously missing Zach. I forgot to mention Zach Wheeler in the rotation, but this rotation really does scare me. At one point or another, you will be replacing Taijuan Walker or Andrew Painter with Zach Wheeler, which that'll look a lot prettier. But Sanchez, Luzardo, you can make the case those are two of the top 20 pitchers in baseball, but Aaron Nola, Taijuan Walker, Andrew Painter. Well, Painter, of course, the infamous prospect type he's ranked second in their organization. We'll see what he could do this year. But between Walker and Nola, I just don't think those are guys you could have in your rotation at this point in their careers. Lineup stayed the same. So even if they do perform the same offensively in terms of runs, I do believe there are some guys in this lineup that will be taking a step back. I don't expect a big season out of Bryce Harper. I don't expect a big season out of Adolis Garcia. Trey Turner may be the one consistent thing in this lineup. I'm not sure if I expect as massive a season from Kyle Schwarber, who absolutely balled out last year. So there's question marks all over the place from the lineup. Are these guys going to stay the same? Are they going to regress? Could they get better? I don't think they're going to get better. That I don't see. And, it really, truly is the same team. They're very reminiscent of the Yankees in the fact that they're kind of just running it back and hoping for the best. I don't think that's a great strategy. I think losing out on Bo Bichette was a huge, huge loss for the Phillies. I think that's gonna eat them alive for the next couple of years. So they won 96 last year. Zips has them at 91. Their over under is at 89 and a half. And I have them under here, but very slightly. They won 96 last year, and I do believe they're probably going to take a 5 to 6 game slide back unless Christopher Sanchez is really able to win NL Cy Young. It's on the table. You could make the case for him to do so. He was awesome last year. I expect more of the same. Will it be enough to get them over 89 and a half wins in a really tough NL East? I don't think so. I lean under. I'm somewhere around 87, 88, even 86. We'll see how everything turns out. But that is the Philadelphia Phillies. Let's hop on over to the real losers of this division, the Washington Nationals, who have a couple cute young pieces, couple prospects, nothing you should really be super excited about, in my opinion. So who they added: Harry Ford, Zach Little, Miles Mikolas, who, man, at this point in his career, woof, woof, for sure. Foster Griffin, Gavin Fiend, Drew Smith. Oh man, that's bad. Drew Smith is one of the most brutal relief pitchers I have ever seen put on a Mets uniform, and I expect that to say the same. They obviously lost Mackenzie Gore in that trade to the Rangers. I think Gore will have a pretty good year with the Texas Rangers. I think that Texas is just a much more friendly pitcher's ballpark, and if we're keeping it honest, guys, they just have a better organization and can probably turn this talent into much more production than the Nationals ever could. Losing Jose Ferrer, another solid guy, losing Josh Bell, losing Paul DeYoung. I mean, both these guys are, way past the primes of their careers. So losing those guys really doesn't mean much. But yeah, this is a complete, I guess you could call it a rebuild year for the Nationals. Let's run through the lineup. Let's run through the rotation real quick. Leading off is James Wood, the one guy on this team that I feel confidently can be a top 30 position player in the sport. I drafted him in fantasy. I think he's a stud. You could put him down for at least a 125 WRC plus, if not more. I think that OPS can be above 800 easily. I think that he has an insane amount of power, beautiful left-handed swing. The guy is huge. And I think he's just going to have a big year and be the one lone bright spot for the Washington Nationals. Outside of that, man, the rest of this lineup is kind of brutal. Nunez, Abrams, who Abrams has had flashes here and there. Don't love him. Defensively, not great. Dylan Lyle, Kyber Ruiz, who also another guy that's had a couple flashes here and there as a catcher. Don't love him, but he is a switch hitter, someone you could put in the middle of the lineup and kind of balance it out. Don't hate it. Don't love it. Luis Garcia Jr., Brady House, Jorbit Vivas, who they just got from the Yankees, and Jacob Young. Heading on to the rotation, man, this is rough. This is rough, boys. I don't see a world where you could surpass 64 and a half wins with this bad of a rotation. Starting with Kate Cavalli, going on to Miles Mikolas, Foster Griffin, Jake Irvin, Zach Little. This is very reminiscent of one of the teams we covered in the AL preview yesterday. I believe it was the Rays, where you really can't, outside of McClanahan, you can't really point at a couple, and Pepio. Maybe it wasn't the Rays. I think I'm confusing myself. It was definitely another team, but they just are very reminiscent of a team that has a decent lineup and absolutely no pitching at all. I think the Athletics is what I was talking about, but this lineup is nowhere near that Athletics lineup, not even close. A couple decent guys in the bullpen. Clayton Beater, mid. Not loving it. There's nothing that I'm looking at on this Fangraphs page right now, and like, wow, like I'm so excited to watch this guy pitch or hit or whatever it may be. There's absolutely nothing at all. I don't even want to keep spending more time on this. If they have a guy outside of James Wood that surpasses 3 WAR, I would be blown away. Like actually blown away. I don't see any world where that's even possible. So 64 and a half wins, man. It is freaking really, 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 really hard to lose more or to lose less than 65 games or to lose more than 65 games, excuse me. Uh, I don't see a world where they are going over 64 and a half wins. I think they will be absolutely brutal. They will be in the same stratosphere as teams like the Rockies. And for that reason alone, especially if you get a couple of these guys going at the trade deadline, this is not going to work out well for the Nationals whatsoever. And I think that they totally need to retool and figure out a plan for the future. Maybe they're waiting to see what will happen with the salary cap. maybe that puts them back into the picture. We'll get into that, talk a little bit with the Dodgers, but that is the NL East preview. I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll hop on over to the next one soon. See you guys.